Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Krona stokes the tensions on the barge to the brink of all-out war, and Jossun lays out a devastating threat to everyone aboard. What cards do Krona, the families, and the Edarans have left to play? Find out next on the Seventh Valkyrie.
Perhaps even you animals have heard of that concept.
The four leaders were silent, and Jossun's threat hung heavy in the air. But just as the four family leaders turned to confer amongst themselves, the Machine King snorted, then broke out into a rolling, cackling laugh, wiggling in his chair with glee. Jossun's gaze broke back to Krona, who held up a hand, took several deep breaths, and spoke, still breaking into the occasional chuckle. Okay, that was funnier than I thought it was going to be. I knew we were going to have this moment, and believe me, I was really excited about it. But it has surpassed expectations. You certainly live up to your reputation, Jossun. Jossun is your name.
You will refer to me as your high...
They certainly can if they want to, but I won't. I don't even refer to the heads of the four families by their titles. You, Speaker for the Flames, what was Azariel's title again?
You will refer to him as Dragon,
the Cheruvian muttered. Krona rolled his eye over to Jossun. You see? Using the wrong name pisses their people off almost as much as it does you. Ah, shit, and I spoiled the game. If you didn't pick up on that, these aren't the heads of the four families. Even I can't get those leaders all out on a barge on short notice. Jossun's eyes were suddenly flitting back and forth.
Did you fuck us, Krona?
Did I fuck you? Did I fuck you? Of course. I fucked both of you. I fucked you both so gently that you thought it was your own lover, and then you thanked me for my time. I'm sorry you're both just a little bit desperate. Jossun rose his voice to speak, but Krona cut him off. Jossun, please, are you really that naive? You thought I was only betraying the old city? Look, before you have a stroke, I didn't bring you nobody. These are important people. And I'm sure the surrender or slaughter of the entirety of the old city will piss the actual leaders of the four families off, and maybe even cause them to retaliate. There's still fuel here for your holy war, if you play your cards right and stop pissing me off. So, calm down a moment. Jossun looked back and forth to the families, and then to Krona, and then said something to his guard and sat back. The first line of soldiers stepped closer, up to the table, and the Machine King grinned, eyes eventually flicking back over to the speakers of the four families. Sorry to keep you waiting, speakers, while I dealt with them, but... Well, here's an interesting thing. You people, and your people, they are so much more colorful and unique than the Edarans are. But I find playing with them to be so much more entertaining. It must be all those little insecurities the Edarans have about being the weaker, less gifted race. His metal eye flicked over to the Edarans for a moment, then back to the families. Though, you do have your own frustrations, don't you, Freelanders? Funny how, despite all of your gifts, you're still second-class citizens, forced to the outskirts of Edaran civilization. I wonder what would have happened if Apostolos hadn't fallen, if that maddening Iron Wolf had never risen to show the world your weaknesses. Looking in your eyes, I can see you ask yourself those questions every day, every night. Your powers made you strong, but they also made you stupid. and cocky enough to be divided and beaten. I wonder, what might happen if we ran back that little conflict again, Would that be in the family's interest? Krona was met with unflinching gazes from the four families, and the Machine King smiled. Ah, your masters have trained you well. Experienced at holding your tongues, it seems, but while your bosses may hate me, and you along with them, it's certainly convenient for them to have me here right now. There's no better opportunity than a war to consolidate their power over the city, right? Especially in a time when dozens of minor families are rising as competition to the Erasmus Pact. You are welcome for that, by the way. All it took was me hiring a few small families for you to cleanse them all, and with the full-throated support of all of your people? Brilliant. You can see why they accepted my offer. For the first time in the conversation, the elegant, distant facade of some of the speakers broke. There were little hushed whispers, a comment to the side, words exchanged between representatives, sudden suspicious looks all along the table. Oh. Was that supposed to be a secret? Just like all that Edaran nonsense about the bridge and the workers and the blockade. I'm sorry for revealing all of your secret schemes, but someone's walking away from this table dead, and I haven't told you who yet, so we might as well all be upfront with each other. Krona's words hung in the air, and the only sound was a click as he laid his chin down, resting his head comfortably on his metal hand. And then all at once, there was a ripple, one that started at the center of the barge and then surged out, from barge to battlecraft to the bay at large, in an unfolding of drawn weapons and ignited gifts, of battle lamps and calls for the ready, of horns to hands and drum beaters raised, the thin twine of parley pulled almost to snapping by the Machine King. Yet he and his men sat unmoved and unmoving, their unreadable calm still keeping the chaos at bay, at least for now. Suddenly, Krona clicked his teeth. Shit. Sorry. I need to add a caveat to that last statement. I said somebody will be walking away from the table dead, and obviously that's ridiculous. It's not possible to walk away if you're dead. I did bring my work gloves in case I need to shove my hand up someone's ass and work you like a puppet. So I guess you could walk away dead if I sort of hobbled along with... What was I saying? Fuck. Okay. Anyway, both of your sets of leaders have conflicting deals with me. One of your delegations is going to die, and now the question is what happens next. Ooh, the drama. But now it was Jossun's turn to snort. He turned in his seat, reached for a firolo, and cut it on a nearby blade, then lit it on a torch. Oozing arrogance, he reached into his belt and pulled out 2 flare canisters, one red and one white.
Are you done stroking your cock for us, Krona?
Jossun asked, puffing on the firolo.
The way I see it is pretty clear. You tell me which one of these to fire off, blood or surrender. And then you and your men hold up your end of the fucking deal. Unless you need reminding of what happened to the last time dwarves thought they could handle Edera.
The ranks of elite soldiers behind Jossun stepped forward as one, a single boot step as they drew shields and spears to the ready. Across the barge, the hum, hiss, and crackle of ignited gifts grew as the elite soldiers of the 4 families prepared for a fight. But Krona wasn't looking at either of them. Instead, he turned around in his chair and whispered something to the faceless soldier at his right hand, who reached into their cloak and handed Krona a tightly wound scroll. Krona reached out and took it, then slid his other hand past the soldier's guard and poked them in the belly, snickering like a child as he watched his soldier try to regain their composure. It didn't go unnoticed. There was a word from the speaker of the Seekers of Dawn, and their men trained their gifts on Krona. At a word from Jossun, the Edarans turned as one to also hold their weapons against the Machine King.
Pick a side or die where you stand, Krona.
The speaker of the Ravens of Dusk spoke.
You betrayed one of us. Make a decision who you will stand with.
Huh?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, little distractions.
Krona said, scanning the entire armory's worth of weapons and gifts now aimed directly at him.
You wanted to know which of you I betrayed harder.
With a single strike from his metallic finger, he sliced off the twine around the scroll, unraveled it, and muttered over a few things.
It's funny what you find in the mail sometimes,
he said, scanning over the scroll as he walked up and sat back in his chair.
I sure hope that this wasn't important to the person trying to deliver it, or the second person trying to deliver it, or the third, or the dozen other couriers I had to murder to keep this information from getting here. You guys see how much work, how much effort, how much blood goes into a good moment on the stage?
But I'm wasting time. You guys want your answer.
Let's see what was in this important missive. Sunset and leveled by Apostolos-class weapon, thousands dead. All outposts rise to threat level Alpha and await further instructions for full-scale response to the Machine King, who has claimed responsibility for attacks all across Edera. Public enemy, considered exceedingly dangerous, blah blah blah, more about the danger, large reward for...
There was a hum then, the twang of an arrow loosed from nearby, and then a metallic ping that rang out across the water. Krona's human eye was still locked on Jossun, but his mechanical one had flicked over, and now focused on the Edaran battlecraft, where Meridia stood in shock, halfway into knocking a second arrow. Her first had come to a dead stop in Krona's outstretched metal arm, caught mid-flight before it could bury itself in Krona's neck. Krona's violet eye turned to meet his mechanical one, and both stared at Meridia.
Now that was tremendously rude.
In a flash, she had her bow to full draw, locked on him. He didn't flinch.
What, are you going to interrupt me again? Or are you going to let me finish what I was saying? Because I can silence you myself right now if I have to.
Commander, run! Get back to the boat! But her shout echoed out and no one moved. All eyes were on Jossun, who looked back to Meridia and then faced the Machine King.
You think we fear you? Jossun said.
And then he stood and began to speak. Of defiance, of hatred, of pure will. Words to inspire men to war. Words that had served him and his men in the depths of the Edaran campaign. Brought fire to the hearts of cowards and determination to the damned. Or at least, that's what he had intended. But as he spoke to rally defiance and death, his words began to flicker, fading in and out with moments of quiet and disappearing phrases. There was unease across the barge. Jossun was still speaking, still trying to rouse his men, but the longer he spoke, the wider the gaps and chasms in his grand speech grew, until his voice came through only as cracked and desperate and unintelligible gibberish, and eventually Jossun's mouth moved but gave sound no longer. With a signal, a frantic Jossun summoned his men into a defensive formation, reaching into his belt and drawing the red flare, slamming it against a soldier's shield to ignite it. He held the shining red glow aloft as the torches of the barge slowly dimmed, waving the flickering red flare back and forth like it would somehow fend off evil. It was then that the Machine King stood, his metal reflecting the color of blood in the glow of the flare. He looked along it, flexing his fist, and then spoke, his voice booming out, unaffected through the darkening silence. You know, Jossun, with that red flare for the first time this evening, you've made the right call. The skies cry out for smoke. The seas and the soil, they thirst for blood. And the only thing you've gotten wrong from the very beginning is how important you, Jossun, were in this grand story. You dreamed of a shining victory, but you should have remembered. I only deal in nightmares. The flare sputtered out, snuffed like a candle, and as the blood-red light disappeared, the smiling, frowning mask of Krona's left-hand soldier fell to the side, revealing a fierce, veteran face covered in impossibly black tattoos that ran up from her neck into eyes as dark as the void. In the fabric of all that was, tightly woven into form by the laws that defined everything that is, there had always been emptiness peeking through the cracks. Space between the stitches in the tapestry. And what could be woven together into reality could also be unraveled. What was stitched could also be torn apart. And in the next instant, the void ripped out into reality, and the nightmare struck with a curved black stroke of midnight.
Hey there! If you're hearing this, it means you're listening to the public version of this episode. I appreciate you taking the time and your interest in the series. It really helps the algorithm, it helps us grow. But if you are enjoying the show, maybe take a look over at our Patreon. We have uncut versions of the early episodes, access to new chapters before they're released for the general public, and you can shape the future of the series by deciding on new merch drops, bonus content, and more. You can get started for free at patreon.com/Seventh Valkyrie. That's patreon.com/7THVALKYRIE. Hope to see you there.